Hey, how's it going? We had a question on eSupport about how to most effectively get part numbers into a report. Now, traditionally, saying pre-version 9, we would need to figure out if we could change the naming feature or the description to include the information we want and then work in the report to kind of manipulate that data the way we want. But in V9, we introduced something really awesome that allows us to do some things that are a little bit more easy. So you see here, I've got, as a matter of fact, as I was testing, I messed this up a little bit. So I'm looking at my Bloom 230M series guides. I actually had renamed mine to my typical, there we go, my typical guide. And this is the 20-inch or the 230M 5000 series. And what I had done is I gave it just this name so that it had nothing to do with Bloom or the guide part name or anything. And I have the description here. It says 20-inch Bloom guide, but that's it. And what I've done is I've double-clicked on this to bring up the material properties. I've gone to advanced. I think if this opens up a bit, yeah, it just shows it automatically. If yours was kind of crunched down like mine, just go to advanced and go to parameters, and you'll see this part num parameter. Now, part num is just something I came up with. You can call it whatever you want. It's totally irrelevant. But what we need to have is we need it set to a text value, and then whatever our part number should be, whether it's the part number from the manufacturer like this, or one that I had seen, I was just browsing around, was at cabinets.com, and that's no way in any shape an endorsement. That is just, I was lazy and did the shortest Google search I could to find out something with a different part number for this, and it was BS. So, I mean, it wasn't like a big significant change, but what we see here is if that's where I buy it from, that's where I'm going to want that part number from. And I can add basically any value I want there. And I can add multiple ones there. It just makes it a little bit more complex for what we're doing right now. So at this moment, for this example, we're going to have one part number associated as a parameter. Okay? So once you create your parameter, make sure you have this name written down or memorized, or at least something easy to remember, so that when you add it to the rest of your parts, you can just remember to put in exactly what it is. That's why I just went part num. So I'm going to close this. And we're going to start a job. And I'm in version 11, but everything we're about to do functions 100% for version 9, 10, and 11. So we're going to start a new job. We're going to just make sure that our hardware is selected. I've got my 230M drawer guide schedule selected. I'm going to hit OK, draw a wall, and we're going to place a drawer stack. All right, we're going to verify that it's using the My Typical Guide material, and it is. I've got 4 pair of those. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to my reports, and I'll show you the report that I created. It doesn't actually show anything. This was literally just kind of proof of concept so that we could get the data in there. I don't want to try and show you how to create the report in the format you want. That's really up to you. But what I'm going to give you is how to get the data so that you can format it the way you want. You see here's the report, and I'm going to click on Report Properties. And you can see here I've got several imports and one table. This table is the data that we're going to use inside of the report. Think of anything in the tables as in memory, meaning that the report can see it. That doesn't mean that we'll ever see it again when we're working on the database, but the report itself needs to have an in-memory table to work with. So the imports, however, those are in database tables. Whatever we create here actually exists inside the database. So to get our tables, our in-memory tables, to work, we have to have something to work with inside the database. So what I've done is I've imported CX material table from, or the material table from the CX material.mdf, as well as the material parameter table from the CX material.mdf. And finally, I use some custom SQL to create these three links. They're not imported data from anywhere. They're just creating three tables. Once I have that, you see I have mats with PN. It has all of this information. If I go to my tables, it's slightly different because I've grouped it together to give me a quantity, so I don't have to sum that up in the report. So now you can see that I can get this stuff, and you can see that I've got 4 of my typical guides, 20-inch Bloom guide, just like you've seen before, and that part number right there. And we changed it to BS 230M5000. So that we can see that that works. Now, how did I do this? Let's take a moment to do a quick step-by-step. So I'll just hit close. I'm going to hit new report. And again, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build our imports. That allows us to create our in-memory table whenever we need to do it. So first thing we do, and I like to do this in a specific order, import all of the data that I need, then create the tables that I need with the data that's been imported. So we're going to make sure that import is selected. We're going to make sure we're at CX materials. You can leave it in the brackets just like this. That means Cabinet Vision will know exactly where to look for that data. And we're going to go in this drop down and we're going to find material. And we're just going to check off everything. And the reason we check off everything, and I like to use my keyboard sometimes to make this a little bit faster. We check off everything, so when I click OK, I get all this data, and it's been brought into the actual report.mdb that we work with here. But the big key is that it's the fields is star. You see, instead of having a list of stuff, so if let's go ahead and import that again. I'm just going to hit M to bring me to material, press enter, and then just pick a few of the things that I might need, and just hit OK. You can see it actually showed that proper list of items that we checked, but when we checked everything, it left us with star. Now what this helps us do is kind of future-proof the report, meaning that if we add any fields to the material table later on, say version 12, 13, 14, 20, whatever, your report's still going to get every bit of information from that table. Otherwise, this one is still just going to get these fields. So we always want to make sure to select them all. Now I'm going to delete this one because I don't want CX material too. So the next one that we talked about, or I said, was the material parameter. So I'll hit M on my keyboard when I'm selecting this to bring it down there and find material parameter. And once again, we're just going to check everything off. And it's not important to know what all of this is right now. We're just importing this data. So again, you can see I've got field star, and there we go. This is all of the parameters. You can see there's a ton of them. So it's a lot more than just the one we added. There's a lot of system parameters that are added. But the very last one is that part num. All right? So the next thing we need to do is we need to kind of we need to join the material parameters, or we need to figure out what materials are in our job. Because if we look at our CX material, there's a lot of stuff that I don't have in here. I know I don't have any art glass wine or art glass frost or any of a lot of these things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a link. And what this does is it lets us take the data that is inside of the database and kind of manipulate it to get the result we want. So I'm going to call this job mats. I like to keep the names short, and there's a very specific reason why, and I will explain that to you after we click OK on this. So we have the SQL. It says select star from parts. We want a default in there. We don't have to edit it in this because I don't get a lot of feedback or anything from this box. So I'm just going to click OK, and you can see I have job mats, and it's got everything in the parts table. So but that's not the information I want. I want the materials. So we're going to go in here, and we're going to go to SQL, and we're going to alter this. We're going to say select star from CX material. And when I refresh this by clicking on that link, now it's got all of the exact same information that's in here. So it's pretty much, I mean, what was the point of making that? Well, here's the point. We're going to filter out all of the materials that are not inside of our job. There's a lot of ways we can do that. The simplest one is to join it to the parts table that we just had. And when we do a join, we want to do what's called an inner join. That means that it's only going to show up records that exist in the CX material table and the parts table at the same time that can join together. If there's no match between the fields or the records, then it's just not gonna show up the record. So we can change this. We'll go cx material.star, and then we'll come here and say inner join so that we make sure that we have matching records only. The table that we want to join on, that's parts, and how we want it to join. And we want it to do cx material.id equals parts.material ID. Now, how do I know that? Experience more than anything else. You can also go into your help files and look for all of the different database information that's available and how to set that up. But this is the way it works. The material ID and the CX material ID I know are matching fields, so I can do that. And now when I refresh, I'll go back to data preview, and you can see now all of a sudden we're seeing a totally different list, a much smaller list of materials. But I do have one for every single part. And for the time being, that's actually okay. We can do that. So we've now limited our list of materials to what's inside of the job. Let's go ahead and limit our parameter list now. Remember, we only want the part numbers. So let's click on this link again. We're going to call this, let's see, let's call it part num params. All right, and we'll hit OK. Oh, and I never actually told you why I like to keep the names small. When we eventually get into creating relationships and such, any tables, in-memory tables that have long names can cause us to throw an error every time we try to have two relationships, because we don't right now get to control the name of the relationship. That's handled by Cabinet Vision. And when it's got 25 characters and 50 characters and just these big long names, all of a sudden it's going to say, well, that field size is too small. You need to come up with something else. And it's an annoying error, and it doesn't negatively impact our reports, but it's really annoying that it happens all the time. So try whenever you can, whenever you have the opportunity to make sure that all of your import names and table names and everything are as small as possible while still being as descriptive as possible. Okay, so now we have part num params. That's a little bit longer, but still not too bad. And again, we're back to having all the parts, and we don't want that. We want the CX material parameter table. So now we've got this, and how are we going to filter this out? What information do we need? Well, again, we need this part num. We only need anything that has that name. So let's just filter by that. So I'm going to go to the SQL, and I'm going to say where CX material parameter.name equals a single quote and part num, and then another single quote. When we're doing things in SQL, we always really want to use single quotes here if we can. I'm going to refresh this, and now you see I only have one parameter. If I had added them to multiple materials, or if this material had multiple part number parameters, it would show up here. Thankfully, we don't have that. We have it all set. We have it all set properly like this. And there's the value we need. And now we just need to kind of join these together. There's a couple of ways we can do this. We can create an in-memory table so that we can just use it right away in the report, or we can do one more join to join all of our job materials with part number parameters. And since we only, for this individual report, and only this report, as I'm explaining it, we don't want any materials that don't have part numbers on them. So it would kind of behoove us to create another link here to link together our materials and our jobs that have part number parameters. So let's do that. Let's add data from another source, click on link, and we're going to call this job mats with params. We're going to hit OK. And again, we're back to this whole select star from parts. So let's change this. Let's start off with job mats. The reason we want to start off with job mats because we've already done a lot of filtering right here to get it to the point that we're at. So that's where we want to start with. Next, we want to join in all of the part num parameters, but I don't need all of this information. I really only need this param value. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our job mats with params link. We're going to say job mats.star. So we've made that. And the reason we want that is when we join in the part num params table, if we have it just say star, it's going to give us all the information from both of the tables. And we don't want that. We just want that param value. So we can also add comma and then part num params dot param value. Finally, so right now if I if I click on this, you see I get an error. It says no value given for one or more required parameters. I'm going to hit OK, and that's the reason is because we have this right here. And in job mats, which is the only table that the SQL is looking at, there is no param value. There's nothing that says part num params.param value. So the SQL engine doesn't know what to look for. So let's join that in. And again, we want only matching records in both tables. So we're going to make this an inner join. I'm going to say part num params. And how do we want them to join? We want it to join on jobmats.id equals part num params.material ID. And now when I refresh it, now I didn't get any errors, and I can click data preview, and now we've got only the materials that are in our job that have a part num value, param value. Now we can leave it as param value, or we can give it an alias. I like to alias as many fields as I can to make it easier to remember. I don't have to remember param value. I know that I need the part number, so I can say as to let the SQL engine know that I need to name this something other than what it normally is. And I can call it part number. When I refresh this, go to data preview, you see now it's part number. And that's exactly what I need. Now, the final thing we're going to do is we're going to create our in-memory table that will allow us to work with the data in the report itself. So I'm going to click select fields to include in the report. I'm going to find we need to find job mats with params. Job mats with params. I'm going to add this table, and I'm going to go through the wizard here to create this just to make it easier on myself. What I need is I'm going to get the ID, I'm going to get the name, and I'm going to get the description. I'm also going to get the, let's say, default cost, and then let's find the part number, and that's what we need. I will go to the group section because I kind of want to group these fields, and I want to go here and I want to get a count. All right, because I don't really need the ID number. That's irrelevant data to the person who's ordering stuff, but the number of those that they need, the quantity they need, that is very important. So if I go to group and just group fields, it's going to now compress it. Instead of having 4, 5, 25, 100 records for a single part, it's going to put them all together and count up the number of parts there are and give me that value. And now I just need to hit finish, and there we go. Now I've got the count of ID. I can go here and you can see in the SQL it's got this alias that tells it to call it count of ID. I can change that to whatever I want, which I like to use QTY. When we refresh, now it's back to the way we want. And there you go. Now that we have it inside of the, or sitting in memory, we can hit close. And since we clicked on new, it's going to ask us to create the report. And now we can go through and start drawing out. Let's say we'll grab our report container, tell it to use a table. There's only one table. We'll hit quantity, name, description, part number. We'll hit OK. And there we go. Now I've got the basic framework of my report. I can go through and I can add part numbers to every single material. I can do all kinds of things with this. And that should be the start of really giving you a very dynamic material, or a better understanding of how dynamic the material manager is now. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them on our eSupport website, and we will all try to help you as best we can.